How is everyone doing? Hello. I hope everybody's doing well, like always. I have my paper here. I hope you have gathered your materials, watercolors to save time. This is very simple, economic watercolor set. I'm showing you here to my left, and you should have something similar, okay? Maybe one color may change on yours, perhaps, but this will do. Um, okay, so I have a couple of sheet of papers. Um, Ideally, with watercolor, it's not like drawing, where I have said. Actually, let me go over the materials: paper, watercolors, a brush. You should have a brush. Um, Water, some tissue paper or paper towels, because we may make spills, and not just because of the spills. You'll see that a lot of the materials in art where you may perhaps by default think that is to correct mistakes or clean up, like an eraser or water or, sorry, the tissue, right, which is used in regards to water to clean up or rinse your brush. It's actually a tool for drawing too, or painting. Okay, so get that out of your mind. An eraser is a drawing tool, um, to create art, not to erase it. And same thing with the tissue, okay? You could like wet a paper with a tissue, you could collect paint with a tissue as a tool. So yeah, so I have my brush. I have another brush, very similar. Um, but if you have only one brush, that's fine. I'm mostly gonna use one brush too. So we're in the same situation. Um, and I think that's it. For the basic materials. I was saying in watercolor, because in drawing, I have said that for drawing, it's very good to sometimes have other sheets of papers under your paper to soften that the work, which we don't work really that hard on the paper, but when you draw, you don't know what's on the surface, if there's any texture or um, that's gonna go through the paper. So that's why you put a few papers or you draw straight on a drawing or sketchbook. But in watercolor, we may want to avoid that. So I'm going to just use one sheet of paper. And the reason is because when you wet your paper, even though it may not go entirely through the paper, right? The paper does get wet. And even though you don't see the wetness on the other side, it could affect the paper under it, if you want to do a painting on that other sheet of paper in the future. Anyway, I have a couple of sheet of papers because I want to show you some things, and it's up to you if you want to do those or not. And the first thing is to go over our brush, um, which the number, it it could default, let's see, as a, it's got to be a round tip. So even though it doesn't say it, that I know that's what it is. That comes in this kit. Um, but I'll say number one. It's a number one round tip, and it kind of looks like this. It's the classic illustration of a brush. Imagine this is the holding part, right? Then the metal is holding the brush, and it gets thinner. It's almost like a pencil. It should look like this, or um, like like that. And this is a very versatile brush. Every brush shape has different purposes, but this is very diverse, and we're gonna go over it right now. Okay, so with me, um, um, when you wet your brush, right? I dip it in the water. I'm not gonna show you every time I dip it in the water on the camera, but you gotta understand that you pull it out of the water, and there's an amount of water that the brush can hold. Okay, meaning um, if it's a bigger brush, right, it was gonna hold more water. So knowing that, there's a limit to it. Same thing with color. So just be aware of that. That's part of the knowledge of as you paint. You get to know every time you dip your brush how much water you're bringing up or how much pigment. All these things you got to be very conscious as you paint. That's the skill of watercolor, understanding the behavior of the water. Okay. Um, So let's get started. And one of the main things, there's many things the brush can do, but one of the things I want to emphasize today, I have some actual dry, I'm going to show you here, dry paint here in my case. You know, the case closes and the plastic part is like my mixing area. So I'm going to put a white sheet of paper so you can actually see what I mean. Um, and this is dry, but as I put water, it's gonna activate. You know, it's gonna get. I'm gonna get color out of this. My point is, I can control my amount of color over here better than on the colors here, because this is so rich in color. That I picked up the color, it's always gonna be very rich. So I bring it up here to dilute it with water, and had a little more control with my colors that are more water based per se. On that note, this is plastic. Um, if you're gonna use another material, make sure that it's non-porous. The less porous, the better. So what artists use, you could get away with glass. Don't use plastic. I mean, this is plastic. It's pretty non-porous, but plastic, as we know, can get porous or scratch. Glass too. Glass is more smooth, but it could also get porous. So ideally, what watercolor artists tend to use is some tray or something coated with porcelain. Kind of like a they call it like a butcher's tray. I don't know if you've seen those. It will look like this sheet of paper or half of it, and it has like a little fold, like a little rim around it. I don't think the whole thing is porcelain, but it's coated in porcelain. And just to let you know, this is me going here on a rant about history. Porcelain is very non-porous. It lasts a long, long time, like centuries, thousands of years. And it's also very hygienic. Okay. So that's why we see porcelain in the kitchen, we see porcelain in the bathrooms as coated, as a coat of things. Okay. And the butcher, since he's working with things that needs to be kept hygienic, also uses a tray that is coated with um, porcelain. So, and it's very fragile too. If you know, and find the grains of the porcelain. So that's why they're the porcelain artists. Historically, the finer the grain, the more expensive and actually hard and more rare to do. So let's get started. Okay, we're gonna play with green because we're gonna do some flowers. It's very basic, but I want to get these um, techniques down for you. And what this brush can do, we're gonna wet the green, activate it. I have some here, like I said. So if I bring water, it's gonna get activated. I'm gonna try not to mix it with other colors around it. And the idea is to, I've done this before with you. Just touch the tip and move it. And you're gonna get a very thin line. Look at that. That's a very thin line. Okay. Don't worry. I'm gonna do a few, and then I'm gonna do the other thing that this brush can do. So I'm gonna do a few more. Let's get a few more going. Thin. Be gentle. I just notice when you mix or move your brush around because it could actually splash, and it splash a little here with two dots. But if it happens, it's no big deal. Um, thin, thin, just barely touching the tip. You see that? Now let's push our brush down, and you're gonna get a thicker line. We're gonna take it easy. So do a few and do them to the side, okay? Um, I may do this just in one paper. You don't need two sheets of paper. If you do them, great. I was gonna say you need two, but we'll do the main painting today here, and you can cut this out. But try to keep this practice we're doing on the side. So now if I press my brush down, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna get a thicker line. Okay, my line is gonna get thicker. Let's see if I really press down. I have to really wet my brush because as you move your brush, it dries up. The paper is absorbing all that water, but that's pretty thick. If I move it kind of sideways, it's gonna be even thicker. You see, there's a limit of the water the brush can hold. So as we pass it through the paper is absorbing the water. You're gonna run out of water, you're gonna run out of the fact that the brush is wet, and then you're gonna get the stippling thing that I've been telling you before. Let's I'm gonna show you in a moment. So I'm gonna do it here. So you see, as the brush, as the brush got dry, then you get this stippling that doesn't have enough water in the paper, right? Texture shows up. Okay, so let's combine those two movements. Let's start thick, and this is good with green because it's gonna look like a leaf or like a grass, like a stem of grass. Let's start with the thick and raise our. Some of you have done this before, and as you move up, you're gonna raise your brush and try to finish with a thin line. So look thick, and as I move it, I go up. See that? We could make this round down here if we want. So it looks more like a grass or okay. Let's try that again. Thick, go up, thick, go up, thick, go up. You could make you could make it that the thickness lasts a little longer. Actually, you see, okay, so you see how in this one, the thickness to the thinner transition kind of was rough. It went from very thick to thin. But this one here, the one a little lighter, has a really nice shape as a grass stem. Isn't that nice? Let's try to replicate that one. Has a softer transition. See? And you could make them going in different angles, obviously. We could go to the left, not to the right. You know. So we go from thick to thin. From thick to thin. And this is very important. We're gonna do a stem of a flower, then look, it's gonna be thin. We're gonna do some leaves coming out of that stem, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin. All right, let's do some flowers. And I'm gonna do them. If you have one sheet of paper, you can still use this part, you know. I'm gonna maybe flip this so you can see it better next to the colors. Okay. So let's do first. Let's do the flowers. And we're gonna do a couple of different things happening here, okay? A couple of things are gonna happen here. So using red, I'm gonna clean my brush very well. And using red, you see this color gets activated. We're gonna try to create this shape that is kind of like a cup. When you first put your brush down after picking color, it's gonna be very wet and rich. So sometimes we may have to tap it somewhere to get that excess of water. But you see, it looks like like a curved cup, and the top is gonna have these round endings. I'm moving the wetness around, and this is what's happening as we're doing this. Okay, this is right now wet. So if I go and I grab more red, I can decide where I'm gonna stress the red, maybe down here. And look, I don't put red in all of it. Sorry, I don't put more red in all of. Sorry, I do not put red in all of it. Just the bottom here, as it's wet. Okay, I could go back and still put even more red down here. And just like that, I made something in different tones. Does that make sense? So because it was wet, I got to add more different tonalities. There you go. It's gonna focus. I'm sorry if it takes a little longer, but it will. Let's do a few more. If when you put your brush it's extremely wet, tap it. Look, I tap it in my hand to get some of that water out. So I'm gonna do it here. I grab color from here, but it's so rich that I tap it in my hand to get that first drop. And I'm gonna do another of this down here. Okay, see that? It's still wet, so I'm gonna add more red down here at the bottom, just like the other one. And I'm gonna make some lines go up with this darker red. Kind of dividing. You see the curve up here? So if I make a line almost pretending to go right there, it kind of divides as if it's petals. I know it's not, but I add more red. I grab more red to just make a last dash here, maybe another dash in this one. But the problem with this one is that it's already drying. Okay, so just be aware of that sometimes, that if you okay, one more, thinner, maybe thinner. That's it. More red at the bottom. And that's our three flowers here. We're gonna do the green um, stem and And leaves we practice in a moment, but let's do another set of flowers. I wanted to start with this that is very simple, but you saw how the shape is like a cup. The top has these curvy lines, and they actually stand for petals. And the fact that we added more red towards the bottom as it was wet, the reason why we want to do it when it's wet is because that red we put down extra down here is going to mix with the other red. And yes, this area is going to be more darker red, but it's going to diffuse because everything is wet. If it wasn't wet, when we put down the red, it's going to be more intense because it's not mixing with anything. But since it's wet, it's going to mix, and look, it looks like it diluted. This is a good example right here. And this one is going to dry and look like what I have said. Okay. So the other set will have more visible petals. I'm going to clean my brush really well. I'm using just one brush, so if you have one brush, you should be fine. And these are going to be the thing here, and we practiced in in the last video, is that I really want you to please control the amount of color you're using. Okay? So it's going to be in blue. Clean your brush really well. I'm going to wipe some of this stuff here. So when I put my blue on the plastic palette, I don't mix it with other colors that are already there. This is why I'm wiping this. Okay, so my color blue will be cleaner. And I'm really careful not to mix it with other colors. Otherwise, it won't be blue. It will be a mixture of all these colors that are here. Okay, great. So blue. These petals will be visible. We'll do about 6 of them. If the flower is facing us on the side, 3 or 4 or 5. Let's see. But the key here is that, look, I activate my blue, I pick up my blue, I put it here, then I put more water because I want to make this color very transparent. So I add more water, and now this blue is very diluted. And let's see how it works. And you see, so now I'm going to go and tap my first somewhere, my first, because the first, look, I grab my color. The first moment I put, I mean, it's physics. The first time after you grab this wetness color here, the first time, this is happens all the time. The first time you tap it on the paper, all the water, all the excessive or amount of water is going to straight go to that paper. It's the first contact. So it's going to be very rich and wet. So to get rid of that, first dot, if you want to be soft, you don't have to do this. But in this case, I want to be very careful with the amount of, I tap it in my hand to get that extra um, drop that will always be. And I put my blue, and this is pretty still, it's transparent. Um, we could use just this blue, so I could pick more water as I continue. But this is one petal, one petal, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have to distribute this color, make it all fair and even. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do maybe 5. 5. It's transparent, but it could have been even more. Okay. So because it's wet, right? I pick up blue now, and in the wetness, look what happens. I can define my petals better from the center, making like a star. This is just experimentation, you know? I wet my brush more, and I'm trying to diffuse this blue that I put right here on the middle. Now I'm going through the outline just to see how that looks. Yeah, let's try another flower from the side. It will be one petal, two, kind of like the one we did, like one bump, two bumps, you see, and three bumps, because you're looking at it from the side. Now the dark blue, I pick it up, and since this is wet, I put it right here in the middle, going up. I could put more blue here in the center of this one. See? More water. Okay, more blue maybe, darker blue. Being careful with this darker blue in this area here. Okay, maybe here we'll do four flowers, so maybe one more, two more. So one petal, two petals, one petals as bumps. So one, two, three, four, and now the dark blue. Remember down here. I wet my brush more, and look, it allows to dilute the blue that I put here that was dark. So I'm gonna grab more dark blue. Now again, I'm saying what I experienced. You eventually will be the judge of your work as you are doing it. This is very wet right here. So I'm getting some of the water out of my brush. See, three flowers. And the fourth one, very thin maybe, up here. One bump. That's very rich blue. So I'm gonna pick up some of that blue. Clean my brush. Sorry, get some of the blue. Get rid of some of the blue. Um, another bump. That makes two, and that's it. This one we're gonna keep very simple. Two bumps. The dark blue, not dark blue, like the rich blue here at the bottom, going up while it's wet. Okay, do it again. And maybe two or three more flowers. And these are going to be very interesting, okay? Well, we're going to do them down here. But let me show you a close-up of those flowers in blue. You see how we started very thin with barely any blue, and I think this could have been even done more transparent, um, the blue. But as it was wet, I added darker blue, not darker, sorry, more rich blue at the bottom of it, and I went up in lines, kind of defining those petals bumps. If you notice, I follow there's bumps or ovals to represent the petals, and as I put the blue down here, I went up creating lines that follow the where the bumps will be created. Okay, same thing here, and same thing with this simple one. So this one, this flower is going to be very interesting. It's kind of like the same format here, more wider, but we're going to do those bumps again. Those bumps represents petals. But the key here is that um, we're going to mix colors, okay? So let's pick orange this time. Clean your brush really well. Get orange. Put it down. That's very rich. And as it's rich, you spread it. I clean my brush so I could use just the orange that I put down. You see? So what I did is that it was very rich, right? So what I decided is I'm going to use just that orange I just put. So I took my brush, clean it again, wipe it, and then got water here and spread this orange to make sure that it is the only amount of orange that I'm going to use for this flower. So what I meant to say that it will be spread around, I meant you see the bumps are here. And that's good. So the idea is we're gonna grab then, and my brush is pretty clean, so I'm gonna clean it. It's pretty clean. I'm gonna grab yellow, and then I'm gonna put yellow in parts of that flower. So it's a mixture of orange and yellow, basically. So that's what's happening. Okay. You could emphasize an area where that is happening, like we did here with the blue. But you know, to be honest, this is blue, this is red, sure, but the fact that we added more rich red, where it's gonna meet the stem down here, and this too, we added more blue where it's gonna meet the stem down here. Even though these are blue, it's different tones of blues. So in this orange one, the yellow is playing the part of adding the orange, the darker orange, if we were to do this. But with just mixing color, which is okay. Another one, maybe bouncing from a little bit to the front. Something like this. Clean my brush, add yellow in random parts. One more, clean my brush, orange. You see, I'm just gonna use that little orange because it's too rich. So I clean my brush, get it wet, and make it thin. That's too little orange, so I have to grab more. And I just barely tap it on the orange. Yeah, that's too rich. So I have to pick up some of that, clean my brush and pick it up. That's it. Clean my brush, add yellow, remember, and that's it. We got our flowers. We're gonna do the stem now. So that's what it looks when you mix colors in the orange and yellow. Very simple. We're keeping it simple, but if you notice, we're not making the colors too rich, okay? You see this? Orange and yellow, and I believe it still could have been more transparent. Um, I like this one. You see how transparent that is? Same thing with the blue. It could have been a little more transparent. I like this one. When it dries, you get that blue edge of the wetness, how far the water wet with the blue reaches and creates that natural outline. Okay. Um, the red is could have been a little more transparent too. But now we're gonna do the stems in green. Clean my brush. The stem is gonna be just a straight line, okay? Very thin, straight line. And our points of contact will be here, here, somewhere here, right here, right here, right here, right here. You see, I'm pointing to the darkest area, right here, the bottom, right here, maybe here and here. And then the leaves are the ones that are a straight line that starts thick and is raised, and you pull the brush up, creating a thinner line. Um, let's go over it. So, as in this, the stem is a straight line, and the leaves are thicker, pressing down your brush, and as you move it, you lift it up, creating a thinner line. Okay? All right. And we'll wrap up with that. Get my green, thin lines, one. By the way, you could direct these stems in different um, directions. Okay. This one goes here. This blue one back here. Maybe come from here. I make the green darker So, and then I'm gonna do it lighter for others. So this one may go here. I'm doing them randomly. This one may be unfinished like this, you know, very gentle. And this one here, like that. You see, there's a thin line, so I kept my brush. I kept my brush just using the tip. Now we're gonna do some leaves, and that will be our painting, okay? And I'll try to bring it up closer so you can see it focus better, okay? So let's do some random leaves. If you do on one side, try to do on the other. Some other separated, so thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin as I move it up. Maybe a little tip here. Thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, small, thick, thin, 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 thick, thin. As you go higher into the stem, closer to the actual flower, make the leaf smaller. Okay, so look, these are gonna be. This one is gonna be very small. You see, because it's too close to the flower. It hasn't grown entirely like that, you know. Okay, I could add maybe a little. Clean my brush. I think I'm done with the. If you want, you could make the stem thicker just down here at the bottom. It's up to you, you know. You see how these are thicker in the bottom? It's up to you. But I'm going to clean my brush and add a tiny little bit of orange in this flower to darken it in the point where it meets the stem. And that's it. You see how I put the orange and then I went back with water, like a wet brush. So that's our painting. I'm going to sign it with a pencil. But I could take I could fold it. I could fold it or take this here and cut it. You could cut it later when you get scissors. But I'm cutting it to so you can see it's independent. So visually you can actually see the painting for itself. You see, this is our painting. I could put this away visually, and you can only see the flowers. But we practice what our brush allows us to do, which is that flexibility of creating thick and thinness. This is still wet, the orange I added here at the tip, but now we can see our flowers. You can tell this is our first blue flowers. I could go back and fix a little bit of these petals so it looks like the others. But practice, yeah. If you do another set right now or soon during the week, you get more better at it. See? And the green could have also fluctuated, like I was saying. I didn't really do a good job with creating different tones of green, some darker, some lighter in the stem and leaves. They're not like that. They all seem to be the same green, but you could have easily made some lighter, some more pure green, and that adds a little more interesting aspect. So I could go back and make some of them darker. I may not be able to do them lighter, but we'll see. Okay. I hope you enjoyed and continue painting. Have a great rest of the week.